Okay, I'm going to start. I brought along a book. I brought along a book that was that I bought in. Oh, that's because I haven't turned it on. Thank you. Okay, I brought along a book this morning that I bought in the fall of 1964 when I enrolled in my first introductory economics course. I went to a strange university that was an engineering school, and everybody took a lockstep curriculum the first couple of years. Even if you were an English major, you had to take calculus 1, 2, 3, differential equations, and physics 1 through 4. By the time we started economics, which was in the second semester of the sophomore year, everybody had 3 semesters of physics, and so we got through one of those gigantic introductory economics books in 1 semester. Of course, we did it with the following kind of analysis. Well, now we're at marginal cost. That's like velocity. Next subject. So everything was kind of in the mathematical analogy to something in physics. One of the interesting things that parts of that course was to read 2 books. This one, it's by Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, and this is actually my original copy of it. I think it's still in print. And The New Industrial State by John Kenneth Galbraith. I'll raise the issue. I still have my original of that one too. I'll come back to both of them when we get to the military draft, because both of them were big supporters of changing from conscription, from a draft to a volunteer army. That should give you a hint. That's the only thing they agreed on. In fact, one of my friends in this course, when we were reading these books, asked me if I had read both of them yet, and I said no. I had read one of them, I don't remember which one, and he said, well, don't bother with the other, just put not in front of everything. And you have the other one, because the 2 of them just didn't agree on much of anything except moving to a volunteer army. The reason I brought the book along is that last time...
Your microphone is cutting in and out.
It did at the last class, too.
So what else is new?
So what do I do? Did you know how to fix it? What's that?
Closer to your mouth.
Thank you. Is that going to help? Whoa! I can hear it too now. Why have we been doing this for 3 days without anybody saying something? Gee. In the book Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman, it was published in 1962. Now it seems like it's gone out again.
We're working on it.
Oh, okay. We have some tech people doing something. Thank you. Well, I'll go back to my alternative microphone, which is simply my voice. Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman, 1962. In here is 1 chapter about externalities and putting taxes on things that create costs on other people that are not taken into account. That was the emissions trading stuff that we were talking about. In here is also an argument for going to a volunteer army. In here is also an argument for free trade among different countries. Today's subject, in here is also the idea behind what was at the time called the negative income tax. And the 2 topics that I'm going to mix together right now, one of them the earned income tax credit, and the other the welfare to work reforms of the mid-1990s, both arose out of that idea. Indeed, it's really remarkable to find a book that there's also a lot on vouchers and education reform and having what today are called charter schools. That was not the language of the 60s. This stuff's all in 1 book. It's really kind of remarkable, actually. And it's while Milton Friedman is often kind of identified as an ideologue, that the issues and the proposals he makes come out on both sides here. Some are for more regulation, namely of emissions. Some are for less regulation. So let me turn to these 2 topics that I want to kind of mix together, because they are really mixed together. The earned income tax credit came out of some studies in the 1960s at the university where I was doing my PhD, although I wasn't working on any of these studies. A lot of my colleagues were, because there were a lot of research assistants working on them. at the University of Wisconsin in the late 60s. They were doing a lot of studies of how people respond to incentives, and in particular, how do people who are on welfare respond to incentives. The welfare programs of the day were called Aid to Families with Dependent Children. They were focused primarily on single mothers, and the question was, could we change the welfare programs which, based in the states, were granting a lump sum to people who were below a poverty line, and then if they got a job and started earning something and they earned $10,000, $10,000 of their welfare payment was taken away. Well, is it a big surprise that they weren't all running out and applying for every job that they could conceivably find? And so the negative income tax, the earned income tax credit, the welfare to work reforms of the mid-1990s are all focused on one thing: incentives. Incentives. The problem in all of the welfare stuff, which Milton Friedman recognized, is that if you want to help people who are destitute, who have zero income, you need to provide them with something in order to buy food and shelter. But very few of us are willing to continue providing whatever that amount is that we provide to destitute people once they get their medical degree and open private practice. So you need some way to transform from providing, well, let me call them these lump sum payments. Let's just make up a number, $10,000, so you can kind of survive. We need to provide some way to transform the system from giving you that amount of money when you have nothing to what we're going to do when you, say, have $50,000. Because I don't think, at least I'm not prepared to give out a lot of welfare payments to people who have $50,000, let alone have an MD and are practicing medicine. What happened in the early days, as I mentioned,
I'm going to switch it out real quick, sorry. You can just keep on talking.
as I mentioned, is that every time you earned a dollar, you lost a dollar. Well, of course, nobody goes looking for a job under those circumstances. Well, let's try a different system, and I'll use these numbers, I'll use 10,000 as an example. Suppose, instead of losing a dollar of your welfare payments, that it is...
You got to check back in. I'll let you do that. You're good to go. You can go.
That instead, the system is set up like Social Security is set up for people who have not reached their full retirement age. I've often argued that the full retirement age in Social Security is actually pretty unimportant in terms of the cost of Social Security. The full retirement age, mine is 66, some of you might have been 65, some maybe are 67, I think my wife's is 67. It was gradually changed. All that happens when you hit the full retirement age is that that if you earn over 15,000 now, 14,000, something like that, before you hit the full retirement age, and you're claiming Social Security, there is first a 50% tax on it. Once you hit the full retirement age, there's not a 50% tax on it. Well, this is the same sort of thing that was going on with the welfare recipients as we started to try to deal with the fact that you can't keep giving them a lump sum forever, no matter what their income level is. So let's take a 50% tax rate. If the original amount is $10,000, and now somebody gets a part-time job and earns $10,000, what would happen is 50% of the earnings, or $5,000, would be subtracted from the lump sum welfare payment, so that this person would now have $15,000 to live on. The $10,000 that they earned, and the $5,000 that remained of the welfare payment after it was taxed at a 50% rate. Well, the issue is, if you give people more to start with when they are destitute, whatever your tax rate is, they will continue to be getting welfare payments at a higher and higher income level. Let's suppose we had started them at $20,000 and the person earns $10,000. The 50% tax rate subtracts $5,000 from their payment, But here they are earning $10,000, and now they're still getting a $20,000 subsidy or welfare payment, plus still $5,000 of their earnings. Well, what if they earn $20,000? Well, then we subtract 10, but they're still getting some of that welfare payment. Remember, it started out at $20,000. Indeed, I think in this case, what does it go up to, $40,000 or $50,000, you would still be getting some sort of payment. So the higher the initial amount, whatever the tax rate is, if we fix the tax rate of the sort of the welfare reduction rate, if you will, if you fix that, whenever the initial amount is higher, the subsidy keeps going to higher and higher income levels. Well, a lot of people who are willing to pay taxes to help destitute, disabled people are not willing to pay taxes to help people who are earning $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So one way to solve that is to lower the initial amount. Well, but it doesn't take too much to lower it to the point where the people you're helping are homeless. And whoops, maybe we overdid that. There is a different way to solve the problem, and that would be to reduce the welfare benefits faster. Let's suppose we gave people $30,000 to start with. So, well, you've got to have at least $30,000. If you have nothing, we're going to give you $30,000. On the other hand, I'm not going to support anybody that's making over $40,000. Well, that means I have to have a tax rate that is high enough to eliminate that entire 30% as they earn $10,000 additional dollars. Indeed, the way I have set up the problem, their tax rate's going to be more than 100%. Okay, so as they earn $10,000, if I want to eliminate their $30,000, that's a tax rate of 300%. Talk about discouraging working, for heaven's sakes. That's even worse than the original 100%. Now, what the earned income tax credit actually, the legislative history starts with, again, that wild socialist, Richard Nixon, who introduced it as H.R. 1 in his first term of office. H.R. 1 did not pass. It failed to pass the Senate. I think I may have that on the next slide. Let me see here. Ooh, I can't even read that. Well, I don't have the legislative history of it on there. Oh, there we go. There we go. Indeed, it failed in the Senate in the early 1970s, and the ideological reason for that is we don't want to give welfare payments to freeloaders who could work. That's the issue, whether they could work or couldn't work, and are not going out looking for jobs. And that's what led to all the economists doing the experiments of how can we balance the initial amount, which, if we have some compassion, we'd like to have higher, with the tax rate, the reduction in the subsidy rate, which we would also like to have high, but if that's high, then they won't go out and work. So we'd really like to have that lower, but if that's lower and the initial amount is really high, they'll be getting welfare subsidies till they're making $100,000 a year. What the experiments did, and again another set of experiments in the late 1980s that were done in the states. One of the nice things about having 50 states is you can sometimes have different policies in states and see what happens differently. And about half the states were doing experiments in the late 1980s, hiring economists to do these experiments of trying different initial amounts and different subsidy reduction rates or tax rates, and trying to figure out what's the combination that allows us to help out the really destitute and still at the same time create incentive for everyone to go out and get a job. Now, there will be no answer that is all black or all white. You cannot have it. You can't have a strong conclusion here. It's going to be a balancing of these different things. And so, to come back to the earned income tax credit, what happened here was the negative income tax actually was going to have everybody fill out an income tax reform. But today, instead of being in the 47%, that's Romney's 47% who are paying no taxes, that many of the people paying no taxes would actually get a check back. We get a check back from the government, a negative income tax. So you could set the break-even point at anything you wanted to, say 20,000. And if you fill out your form, and I have a mentally disabled sister, has no income, fill out her tax form, she has 0 income, and the tax rate schedule would go below the 20,000. It would just be negative amounts would be coming back. That's what didn't work. But Senator Russell Long, I think it was, from Louisiana, one of his staff guys was talking to Robert Haveman, who was on my thesis committee and was the head of the Institute for Research for Poverty at Wisconsin. Incidentally, Haveman is a Vanderbilt PhD, been one of our most successful economics PhDs. He was heading this institute that had huge federal grants to study this incentives issue of what's the optimal tax rate. And this guy, Michael Stern, and Haveman got together and were talking about it, and they kind of turned it on its head. Instead of giving people money for having really low incomes, which could get you into an ideological debate, they scrapped that idea. They scrapped Friedman's idea that people who have absolutely no income should be supported by the country as a whole. Just scrap that idea, let them starve. It doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is for those who are not at the bottom level, and I'll come back to the people that we didn't let them starve. I'll come back to what happened with them in a minute. But for those who have some income, incentives really matter. And instead of talking about the incentive of how much of their welfare payment do they lose when they earn more, let's forget that. There is no welfare payment. We're not going to give them anything. But if they get out and get to work, we'll give them more. So we will do what I did with my 4 kids. I raised their after-tax earnings rate until they were 21 or 22 when they would normally graduate from college. I said, I will pay all your taxes, including Social Security taxes. Well, my plan was that then that their after-tax earnings from whatever jobs they could get would be a little higher. And that part of the plan worked. The second part of the plan didn't work. I had in mind that they would then do what I did, which was to save that all up. I have one daughter who worked a lot more than the other 3 kids and ended up with the largest credit card debt of them. She also, as her 2 sisters say, has more clothing than the other 5 people in the family put together, including 3 other women in the family put together. My plan worked for the work incentive, but I needed to put into effect a savings incentive as well. I should have not subsidized their earnings. I should have subsidized the increase in their bank balance at the end of the year. You know, I realized that when the youngest one was going to college, and one day I was reflecting on how comes this didn't work out quite like I had planned. Namely, the answer is I had a dumb plan. It didn't work very well. So what the earned income tax credit is a payment, a subsidy for working. It starts out, I think, at 40% for people who, you have to have earnings to do this. You have to have a W-2 form. And your total earnings have to be low as well. The earned income tax credit has the same phase-out problem. We don't want to pay 40% subsidy to the Vanderbilt faculty for their, well, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad idea. But probably we don't want to subsidize their earnings because there are few of them that are starving. And so we do have to phase it out. But it doesn't have the problem that the other kind of welfare payment did. When you phase it out, people will stop working. Here you already, for the people that are getting the earned income tax credit, they're already getting 100% of their earnings. You just upped it to 140% of their earnings. Or in my case, if my kids were in the 10% tax bracket, I raised it to 110%. Plus, we could say maybe 116 or 17% with the Social Security payments as well. And so this, it turned out, ideologically, this you can sell on the grounds of, yeah, that'll still get them off their duff and get them out there working. This will be a strong incentive, and indeed it did pass, when, in 75? I don't see it up there, but yes, yeah. 75, and it started out with a 10% subsidy, just like my plan for the Siegfried kids. By about 3 or 4 years ago, it was up to 40%. Yeah, there's on the last one. Stays constant up to 15,000, and then it starts to phase out. Then it starts to go down, so that just like marginal tax rates with the progressive tax go up, these subsidy rates start having marginal rates that are going down, and it phases out in the mid-40s or something. Well, that says 38,000. I think it's into the 40s now. Now, what happened to the, before I switch to the others, let me make a couple of other comments about Friedman's ideas. Friedman was really interested in this negative income tax, a thing that did not come about. Although its effects, when you combine the earned income tax credit and the welfare to work reforms of the 90s, which I'm going to turn to now, you have almost what the negative income tax was going to do, but you have it out of two completely separate programs. The earned income tax credit's a federal federal 1040 form program. The welfare to work stuff is state programs, and they're separate from this. Friedman made some other points about the negative income tax that are important, and some of which are interesting. He was arguing for the negative income tax because the Internal Revenue Service would enforce it. The Internal Revenue Service in the United States is about held in the lowest regard of any kind of tax authorities anywhere in the world, and we have ended up implementing different public policy programs at much higher expense because of our cynicism about the IRS. Australia has several programs they administer. In particular, all of their financial aid for higher education is on an income contingent plan through their tax system and is administered much less expensively than our need-based income programs. So Friedman was actually in favor of administering through the IRS. He took the point of view, whether you like a policy or not, at least do it as cheaply as possible. If you don't like a policy at all, say to yourself, well, they're doing terrible things, but at least we're not spending a lot of money administratively doing it. If you like the policy, you should say, let's save administrative funds so we can plow it back into the policy.
Yeah, it looks like it started off at a 10% subsidy.
That's correct, yes.
40. Is the consensus that this policy actually works, or it's just another policy going out of control?
No, this is probably one of the programs that economists of all kinds of ideologies really agree on. This is the one that really does work. And if there's going to be anything in terms of our income redistribution policies that you want to survive, this would be the last thing to get rid of.
How do they measure that it works?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to go back and look at the particular studies.
Yeah, because oftentimes politicians have problems declaring failure. They only declare victories.
The way, and I'll show you in just a moment how I guess I do know the answer to that. It creates a strong work incentive. The studies back in the 1960s didn't do this, but by the 1980s, economists had recognized that in order to do experiments, we had to design them so that people were randomly, they did not voluntarily sort themselves into I'm on welfare and I'm not on welfare. Because indeed it's sort of like, well, I did a study once of students, what was the question? There were two kinds of teaching methods. I forgot what they were. Let's say lectures or small discussion classes or something like that. If you announce ahead of time that section A is a lecture and sections B, C, D, and E are small discussion classes. And then at the end of the semester, you give everybody the same exam, or you try to give them an exam at the beginning too, so you have a baseline. And then you give them one at the end. The information you get out of that would be completely worthless for trying to decide the question, which way should I teach this subject? If you're going to teach it with both options, that information is going to be useful. But often the experiment is to decide which one to discard and which one to keep. The problem is the people who know their own way of learning best by a lecture go into the lecture, and the people who know that their own way of learning best is in a small discussion class go into the small discussion class. Okay. What you don't know, if, say, you abandon the lectures and say, we're just going to have the small discussion classes, is how well the people who think they do best in a large lecture class will do when they're in a small discussion class. And they may just do terribly under those circumstances. So looking at the great learning advances of the people who know that they're good in a discussion class doesn't tell you anything about what would happen if you took the other people who know that they don't want to have anything to do with that and put them into a small discussion class. Well, a lot of these experiments back in the 1980s had this characteristic because there's a good reason to want to give people choice. We don't want to force people into something that they don't want to do, and we might have different kinds of welfare programs that have different subsidy tax rates, and as a result, we didn't really learn very much out of this. Another example of this is one year I was the associate provost here. That was when Chuck Kiesler went to be the president of Missouri, I think it was, and Tom Burrish became the provost, and then he got three of us to take on his responsibilities. I had the fewest. I had only two, admissions and financial aid, and my other colleagues had about 10 or 12 different things, but mine were the biggest as well. And during that year, we were interested in, well, somebody came to us, I guess should remain anonymous, and said, I'll give you a whole lot more aid money if you will see if this aid program works. What aid program are we talking about? We called it, I called it anyway, the Michigan program. The idea was to get students away from the University of Michigan and Virginia and California and any other of the top public universities. It was designed to bring some students to Vanderbilt who were completely absent, namely children of people with incomes about the level of the faculty. At that time, Vanderbilt had we've always had a pretty strong need-based aid for very low-income people, and we have when I started here, we were #1 in the country for full pays, meaning people not on financial aid at all, meaning we had a lot of students driving Mercedes and BMWs as well. What we had was nothing in the middle. Just, it was hundreds of students out of 6,000, 7,000. It was just very, very low. So this person, and I don't know if you're aware, we have these Harold Sterling Vanderbilt full ride scholarships that are very nice and help very low income people a whole lot. But you run out of money pretty quickly giving them out that way. And the question was, suppose we only gave half of tuition to somebody, and they had to pay the other half. This comes up in athletics too. While in basketball and football, all the players are on full rides. In baseball, they aren't. Most of them are half rides, if you will. And Coach Corbin has to try to persuade families that, well, we'll reduce Vanderbilt's tuition from 40 to 20, but it's worth it for you to pay the $20,000 to come here because look at all the guys that I've had before who were in the major leagues, and this helps a whole lot. And they can pay their parents back. I'm sure David Price has been able to pay his parents back for the tuition money that they loaned him or paid for him. So what we did was to try to demonstrate that actually offering half rides would get some people who otherwise would not enroll here at all Oh, we did an experiment. We lined up all these people who had income, you know their income levels because they're all applying for financial aid, and you have the FAFSA form, and their parents' 1040. So you know all the income information. And we took a whole bunch of these students who were targets for these half rides instead of the full ride. They didn't have low enough income for the full ride. These are people whose parents are making $90,000, $100,000 a year, maybe 120 if they had 2 kids in college, for example. And a lot of them, if they live in Michigan, would say, let's go to Michigan in-state, or let's go to Berkeley if we're in California in-state, which are fine institutions, but we're trying to pry them away. So the idea was if we could make Vanderbilt cost about as much as a public university, would they come here? But the source of the funds said, I'm only going to do this on a short-term basis unless you show me it really works. I don't want to just be throwing money down a rat hole, or the way he would put it, giving money to families that would have come anyway. My goal here is not to help people feel better and be able to buy a car. There is evidence that the Georgia Hope Scholarships have had an effect on the quality of the cars that students have. I'm not joking about that. That's one thing you can get, because registrations are public information, so you can get the kind of car and the year of car, and some economists at Georgia have done some studies of that. So this guy said, I don't want to do that. I want to try and change their decision to get them to come here. So what we did was we lined them all up, and every other one got an offer of a half scholarship. Now, we lost our financial aid director over that. He said that was immoral, and he has a point. We did make sure that we did not have 2 people from the same high school side by side who had identical records. One got an offer and one did not. But the whole idea behind this random assignment of people is that we need to see if there's a difference in the enrollment rate of those who got the half scholarship from those who otherwise are very similar but didn't get the half scholarship. Okay. Now, these same kind of experiments and this same basis has been done, was started to be done in the late 80s for welfare payments, and it does raise an ethical issue. He argued that it's completely inappropriate to not give aid to somebody who's exactly the same as someone else. And our response to that was, well, then we have no aid to give out, because that was the conditions of the donor. So you have to decide whether you want to have a little unfairness in the short run to try to show that it has effect, to have a big effect in the long run, or you're just happy with the status quo and the donor might have given their money to the American Heart Association or something else. It wouldn't have come here. And the same thing went on with the welfare programs. Right now there is a wonderful experiment going on Medicare and the effect of health insurance. And it's in the state of Oregon, which I forgot how, but it ended up with a lot of money to bring many more people on to, I said Medicare, I should have said Medicaid, because that's what it is, to bring many more people on to Medicaid who were uninsured. And what they got the state of Oregon to do was something just like this: line up the eligible people, every other one gets it. And you can again say, well, this is an unethical thing to do, but indeed, if you don't do it and don't try to make the right kind of test, you may never convince anybody that it has any effect whatsoever. You know, it is a dilemma of how to do this.
How did your half scholarship thing work out?
We got some, I forgot how many, out of, it was enough that they kept going for a while. I haven't followed it. That was in the early 90s. I followed it for 5 or 6 years, and then I kind of, it was far enough away from the administration I didn't follow it anymore. You didn't get them all. But you got some of them, as we would have expected. And the question was, did we get enough to make it worthwhile? Yes, and I think the money did continue for some time. Whether it's still there, I have no idea at this point. This whole thing is called randomized experiments, or random assignment. You may hear this sometimes on the news and so on, and that's what they're talking about. Randomized assignment where you don't get a choice as to whether you want to be in the Medicaid experiment in Oregon or not. The Oregon one, incidentally, has hundreds of thousands of people in it, so it's really big, and it's so hard to ever get a randomized experiment in medicine, because if you think it's a delicate ethical issue for admitting a student or providing aid to a student, how about when you're talking about health insurance and live or die as the outcome? Yeah. The earned income tax credit and Friedman's negative income tax proposal got around a problem of the 1960s where the aid was based on the number of kids. That's an incentive, all right. Perhaps not the kind of incentive that we're interested in. A lot of people were moving around. Everybody was poor people were moving to New York, where the benefits were higher. You still have some of this kind of problem with unemployment benefits vary by state, and it's better to be unemployed. My unemployed son is in Chicago. That's better than to be, say, in North Carolina, which is better than to be in South Carolina. These are the states my kids live in, and I have evidence on the unemployment rate of them. Talk about a real incentives problem. Actually, my wife and I talk about this a lot. We both started, she was married when she was 18 the first time, and started working at filing license plates and license applications for the state of Tennessee. I was on my own at age 20, and both of us were actually saving money and working like crazy. And we just can't figure out why our children don't have this same motivation. Well, we were on our own. There was no going back. I was kicked out of the house. My father didn't speak to me for 5 years. She was the oldest in a family of 8 that was pretty poor. She knew there was no going back. So what was our safety net? Nothing. This was ours. And she says, well, one reason our kids, all 4 of them are majors in the humanities. My wife's an accountant and I'm an economist. See a difference there? So why did they all major in the humanities? Well, actually, I argued for them to major in anything they wanted to, because my plan was that they'd go to graduate school. One has set foot in a graduate program, and that's it. They don't have anything to do with that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, I might have had a different viewpoint if I knew this was the end for you. I think a liberal arts education is just wonderful, but then at some point you got to figure out something to do, something you can sell. And our dilemma, and to her credit, not an economist, she's got it just right in terms of the economic models. She said, well, our problem is that they know if they get in trouble, we're there to bail them out. And I said, okay, all right, we'll get them motivated. We'll tell them we're not there to bail them out. And she looked at me and said, really? I said, well, not really, but we'll tell them that. And her reaction was, boy, you think they're pretty dumb, don't you? And the word she used was, we have a credibility problem. That turns out to be a buzzword that economists use a lot in negotiations, in all kinds of things, credible threats, credible promises, and so on, and doing things. Sometimes we even do things that are otherwise not only not to our benefit, but even harm us in order to show to someone else that we are serious about this. This is really credible. And so we haven't figured this out, actually. We'd sit here. PhD in economics does not really help you all that much, I guess, in child rearing. Also, Friedman made the point that the stigma of participating in this program is low because of a negative income tax, you'd be filing an income tax return and no one else gets to see your income tax returns. Some people would say that's a problem with it as opposed to a positive, because they do want to stigmatize the people that are getting welfare payments. So that is some kind of an incentive to get yourself off of it so that you're not stigmatized. So enough of those, I think. Yeah, what I want to do is go back now to the other half of it and say, well, what happened to the poor people that had no income? Here we go. that had no income at all. Well, the state programs continued, was the answer to that. And so you have the earned income tax starting out in the late 70s, continuing on to this day. Gets high marks from economists. The state programs don't get as high marks from economists. These were the programs that dealt with the person who, well, take my sister, who is completely unable to work and would starve to death if she didn't have Social Security disability and a brother that contributes. And so these people with zero earnings are getting something. Now come back, and I already mentioned it, but I'll remind you, in the late 80s, the state started doing experiments because they wanted to get a lot of these people off of welfare. And into the 90s, you have Clinton becoming the president. He was the governor of a state before. It turns out governors, including Democratic governors, were very much in favor of getting people off welfare. Wait a minute, isn't that the wrong side of that issue? No, it's not. No, there was a lot of Democratic governors that were really wanting to get people off welfare so that they would have the money that was otherwise going to welfare so they could do all kinds of nice things to people so they would vote for them again. In other words, that whatever their pet projects are. At the same time, in '94, you get I think they called it the contract with America. I have some liberal colleagues that call it a contract on America. Newt Gingrich's strategy to bring in a whole lot of conservative members of the House of Representatives. They like welfare to work reforms for different reasons. They want to get them off their duff and get them to work. Well, whenever you can find a policy where both parties have the same goal.
Plugged in.
The what? Oh.
It says you're about to do that.
The computer is not plugged in. Can you get somebody to, so I don't waste time hunting for where the plug is? It looked like it was plugged in.
Power supply at the other end, there's some wall outlet there.
There's nothing plugged in the wall. Interesting. And there's enough wires in there that I don't want to sort through them, so let me keep going. Well, can you figure out how to plug that thing in? Where was I? Help me get back on track here. Both sides. Both sides liked it. Yes, you're going to see the same thing with the military draft. For different reasons, you get the Democrats and the Republicans liking something. This is a way to get a deal done. They don't have to like a policy for the same reasons. They just have to like the policy for a reason. And indeed, then in the mid-1990s, using all of these experiments that the governors were doing in their individual states, each governor trying to figure out, how can I reduce the welfare bill here so that I can have money to spend on something else? Well, using these, you end up with what's it called? The Personal Responsibility and blah, blah, blah Act of about 96, I think it is. And I keep thinking, a friend of mine, Rebecca Blank, was on the Council of Economic Advisors. She is currently the acting Secretary of Commerce. She was the one who was pushing this as Clinton's staff person. And what a great name for a bill. Everybody's in favor of personal responsibility. And there's another bill that was passed 4 years ago that I would have named the Personal Responsibility and Affordable Care Act. What's the personal responsibility? Well, the Siegfried son just turned 26 and he doesn't have any health insurance this month. Oh, come on, Mom, Dad, I'm healthy. Yeah, well, you're driving a bicycle around the city of Chicago. Do all of the bus drivers know that they're supposed to keep distance from you? Yeah, so he looks at us and says, well, if I did get hit, wouldn't you pay the hospital? I said, oh, so we're an insurance company. I didn't know that. So I've gotten some little paper and I wrote up on the top, Siegfried health insurance company? Invoice. We're going to send him a bill if he thinks we're the health insurer. The problem is you don't want to be an insurer of one client. Indeed, insurance works because you have a whole pool of people. You kind of know some of them will have problems, and you also know some other ones will not have problems. And that's the whole idea behind insurance. So being an insurer of one person is a bad idea. So different approach. Mom and Dad, we're seeing him this weekend. We'll get into the, you have a personal responsibility to get some health insurance. I've given him the websites for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. They have some pretty good high deductible programs. You need me? Or, I'll get it back up. Okay. And indeed, the problem, I think, with a lot of the healthy young people, there were lots of other people who didn't have insurance, but the healthy young people who weren't on insurance is that they just were not going to take the responsibility. They wanted to sign up later on. Well, of course, if you only sign up when you're sick, it's not insurance. It's a sickness subsidy program is what it is. Kind of in the same way that I've always been baffled by maternity insurance. If you believe that almost all maternity cases are planned, and I don't really believe that, having a whole lot of nieces who I hope they weren't planned. But if you were to believe that, maternity insurance makes no sense because somebody just buys it when they know they're going to use it, and so all you're doing is paying the maternity bills. Well, just pay them. You don't need the insurance program in the middle. Add in some administrative costs. Insurance only works with, okay, let me get rid of this. Only works when you have a truly unplanned event. Get out of there. I don't want to update anything. It's hiding there. This is what I want. Hello. There we go. And now I have to go all the way down to there we go again. So insurance only works when you have a pool of people and different people will have the event or will not have the event. But my point here was calling it the Personal Responsibility Act might have actually gotten a little more support because that's part of it. There's other parts that are not like that, but that's a part of the bill was to get at people who were just saying, I'll just go to the emergency room and I'm young, I don't have any assets, I'll just declare bankruptcy. After that. That was one strategy, and maybe not a stupid strategy for a 25-year-old with no assets and whose main risks are getting hit by a bus on their bicycle or something like that.
Most 20-somethings believe they're in this one.
Well, that's a different problem. That is true. But it's a different problem. Even the ones that don't believe they're invincible might have been sensible to just say, I'll go to the emergency room then. Now, let me see here. Click down here. I've talked about all of that already. So here we are in the mid-1990s now when we have two different coalitions. We have the Republican House wanting to kick people off their duffs and get them to work. We have the Democratic state governors just lusting over the money they could save and how they could use it for other sorts of political purposes in the states. We had the random experiments of the late 80s so that we could look at these different lump sums and tax rates and try to figure out at what combination minimizes the amount of state money that goes into welfare. And so it was just an opportune time, and you get the 96 Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunities Act out of it. It has a lot of different provisions to it, but one of the main ones is the fact that the states have to reduce the benefits or cause people to lose eligibility if they do not participate in the welfare to work reforms. I have an assistant who helps with these slides, and her fun part is putting the pictures on. That's Octomom. I made some comment to her that I don't know what a person on welfare looks like, and she came back with this, and what was it, 8 kids? She already had 6, didn't she? Yeah. Yes, she had 14 kids, and she said if there's ever somebody that's characterizes that. That's who it is. I didn't pick the picture. Yeah. Here is the interesting chart, and somebody had asked earlier, how would you know the program is working? Well, here's how you see how the program is working. There's two things on this graph. On the left-hand side is the number of families on welfare. The arrow over here, it says caseloads. It's the solid line going to the right. And this is when the bill was passed, but look at sort of the year or 2 years before that. You already see the caseloads coming down, don't you? Okay. And on the other side, the dashed line is the labor force participation rate of, I think it's single mothers, excuse me, which is different from single women. But they were most of the people that are on the state programs at that time. And you see their participation rate starting to go up before the bill was passed. Well, of course, the bill is drafted before it's passed, and there are hearings going on, and even before that, there's lots of talk about the bill. And so people start to anticipate. Doing a lot of economic studies, you have this problem of what is the date when something happened? Well, if you're trying to look at people's behavior, the date that's relevant is when they learn the information that might cause them to change their behavior. Of course, information does not all come out on one day. It's not everything is a secret and then boom, well, we announce it. But people start to draw inferences from different things over time. So a lot of our studies have this kind of problem of trying to figure out when it happened. Now, don't be misled here. The scale on the right-hand side does not start at 0. You see a lot of graphs like this on television. You've got to be real careful. It turns out that there's a decline, an increase in the labor force participation rate of this group from, mid-60s to about mid-70s. It's not, as it looks on the graph, like it went up almost doubling there. However, a labor force participation rate change like that is enormous. It's just enormous. You don't get a percentage point change per year in labor force participation rates normally. And indeed, the reason to superimpose the two on each other is it's pretty clear. Caseloads are going down, and how are these people surviving? Well, they're participating in the job market, and indeed, this looks like a big success story as well.
So
yes, sir.
was there a strong job market to support that shift? Was there a strong job?
During that time period, there was. Yes, there was. It might have been a lot harder to do. It's not the overall job market. Indeed, it would have been much harder to do over the last 4 years if you looked at, as have looked at some papers that show how the unemployment rate has changed by decile of income. Take everybody in the country, the top 10% of earners, not the 1% that everybody's talking about. The top 10% are in the first decile, the next 10% in the second decile. The unemployment rate did not go up at all in the top 2 deciles. Those people, probably most of us, decided not to participate in this, what is sometimes called the Great Recession as opposed to depression. If you get into the third decile, it went up a little bit, third and fourth. It's from the middle on down. All of the unemployment has come from the middle on down. And that would have made your job very hard here because very few of these people who were on welfare, Octomom was not going to become a surgeon or an attorney instantly. And so they were going into the lower income jobs. That would have made it much harder. Let me stop with that. If you have any other questions about this, either of these, and welfare policy, it's all about incentives. I drafted I was the chair of a committee. I did all the writing. Because I drafted what are called the high school economics standards in the country. It's a book, and it has actually 20 basic principles of economics that we think a high school student, same as actually a college introductory course person, should understand. They do not include some technical things that some of my economist colleagues are just infuriated about, how to calculate elasticities and things like this. And our answer to that was our criteria for what goes in is what a reasonable, knowledgeable 40-year-old citizen should know, and they don't need to know how to calculate elasticities, for heaven's sakes. What they do need to know is that if you would raise the price of something, people tend to buy less of it. If you raise the price of labor, people tend to supply more of it. And indeed, the elasticity is the question of how much more. And it's very important in a lot of economic policies, but not for the general citizen. If you look at the beginning of these, one time I had a draft copy of this thing, and I laid it on our kitchen counter, and my wife walks in, and she goes, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, this is a committee I'm chairing. Don't worry about it. You're not interested." And she looked at the first one, and the very first principle says, people can't have everything they want. She looked at that. She read it back to me and said, "Is this what this says?" And, "Yeah." "They pay you to do this?" Well, yes. I guess spouses are there to keep your ego in check or something. His main job. Among the first four, then she was paging through them. I think it's number 3. It says incentives matter. Okay. Positive, it had 2 parts: positive incentives and negative incentives, or what we call carrots and sticks, and so on. Specialization. Thinking about changes. If you're really asking, in most of our lives we ask, how should we behave differently? How can we make things better? Better means change. So thinking on the margin, this is the reason economics programs all require introductory calculus, which is all about changes. First derivatives, how much does X change when Y changes? So one of these basic principles is think on the margin. Oh, another one is sunk costs don't matter, meaning don't worry about what happened in the past. We bought some theater tickets, and the night of we're planning to go, we can't find them. They're lost. So what should we do? Let's just assume that it's not sold out. Should we go and buy replacements, or should we sit home and punish ourselves? Well, if we had made the decision already that the show was worth the price, and if paying for the tickets a second time does not cause us to skip Friday night's dinner, meaning it's not absolutely essential for our lifestyle, if you already made a decision the show was worth it, then why would that be different now that you lost the tickets, for heaven's sakes? Yes, it's a shame that you lost them, and doggone it, I can think of all kind of events when I lost tickets or made an investment that lost. I had some of, what was that guy from Mississippi, the WorldCom guy? No, it wasn't Enron. It's Evers, may he rot in jail forever. I had some MCI bonds and didn't realize it. Now, because I lost the MCI bonds, does that mean I should never buy any other bonds and stay away? No, it doesn't. It just means I made a stupid mistake. And indeed, for the theater example, often used in economics courses, yes, you should go out and pay for tickets again, unless you've gotten some new information that the show is going to be terrible or something in the meantime. Well, then you could use your new information to decide not to buy them the second time. The point is, bygones are bygones, sunk costs are sunk costs, and so these first 5 or 6 principles in the standards that should be taught in high school are all these really simple ideas. Now, you'd be surprised how many equations we can whip up to say that incentives matter and things like that. In other words, there's a lot of subtle points, and it can be very complex. But when it comes right down to it, the basic economic ideas are really ones where once you look at it and get it, you say, duh, what was so difficult about that? But they do tend to be things that even for economists, took some time. You keep hearing them, you say, what are they talking about? Finally, in economics, there's a lot of aha moments. I get it. Is that all there is to it? Yes, that is generally all there is to it. Any other questions about the welfare stuff? Then I want to try to do one more today. I have 15 minutes. I think I can do it, and I'll catch up a little bit. And then, incidentally, I'm going to probably skip my favorite one. You might notice I'm behind. It's on antitrust, and it's only a favorite to me because that was what my career was. But most other people go, thank God. And so I think we can stay pretty much on track. Go ahead.
What was the combination of incentives that worked?
Oh, it differs. Oh, that's a very good question. And indeed, this is one of the benefits of having different states. It could differ in different states. And to answer that question, what you need to know is what is the particular set of population for which one combination worked better than another combination.
Did they share that information?
I don't know, but I don't know that they wouldn't. The economists certainly would. The economists that were doing the studies were trying to publish them in our leading journals, so there's no secrets here. But you might say, I'm the governor of Mississippi. What can I make out of some studies done in New York? Mississippians probably think New Yorkers are different. Different. I didn't say better or worse. I said different.
But if the population that you were trying to incentivize was...
If you had a population like that, you would want to see the results of the studies and say, oh, so that's the way you do it for that particular group. It might vary for single mothers that have a father of the children involved or not, for example. I would be shocked if it didn't matter. Well, let me turn to the most recent in this book, the most recent change, the Pension Protection Act of 2006. There's a whole new field in economics called behavioral economics. Actually, in my career of about 40 years, there was a Gary Becker, about when I started the field of human resource economics, thinking of investing in humans that would generate more productivity in the future. And then along came, about 10 years after that, another new field that was pioneered by a guy who grew up on a farm near Murfreesboro and just died 2 weeks ago, James Buchanan. He went to Middle Tennessee State University. His grandfather was the governor of Tennessee. By the time Jim was ready for college, he wanted to go to Vanderbilt. The tuition, this would have been in the 30s, tuition was about $100 a semester, I believe. The family didn't have any of the graft money left. And that is out of his autobiography, honest to God, that his grandfather had amassed. And so he couldn't afford Vanderbilt, so he went to Middle Tennessee State. He also then, right after World War II, went to UT Knoxville and got a master's degree. After that, he went to Chicago and got his PhD. He's a Nobel Prize winner. And his contribution was in the area of looking at the public sector in terms of the same incentives that we try to think about when we're looking at the private sector. He would ask, what are the goals of bureaucrats? What are the goals of politicians? What do they do to try to achieve those goals? And then the idea would be, if you don't like those results, if you understand better what's going on, you can pull some of the levers to change some of those sorts of things. Now, the third new field in my career started about 10, 12, 15 years ago, called behavioral economics. It's a strange name because I thought all of economics is about behavior. When I ask other people what discipline they think is closest to economics, political science really isn't it, and business isn't it either. The ones that economists would say are psychology or physics, actually. A lot of the relationships tend to be the same, but psychology is probably the best one. And that's the reason why economists' predictions are so terrible, because we're dealing with people, including some people like me who, when they listen to what the new incentive is, say, I'm going to behave in the opposite just to screw up your experiment. And there are a lot of people like that. I tell my wife I cannot watch the ads on the Super Bowl because if we watch them, I don't want to encourage those people, so we're not only not going to buy those products, we're going to stop buying those products. And so she's agreed that we'll turn off the ads so that I won't go around saying we're never buying a Pepsi anymore or whatever the ads are. There are people like that. And then there are lots of people who behave in different ways for who knows what reason. They're not physical relationships. Behavioral economics means something different to economists, however. Its meaning is behavior that doesn't seem to be predicted well by our standard models. In other words, anomalous behavior. One of these things is going on right now. The example that a lot of people give of anomalous behavior is the January effect in the stock market. What is the January effect? If you look at Januaries in the stock market almost always goes up in January. Because it's cold? What? The economist says that can't happen. Why not? Because if I know the stock market's going up in January, I'm going all in on December 31st. That will bid up the prices on December 31st. And whatever was going to be a rise in January won't be as much of a rise because I pushed up the starting point. Moreover, I'm getting out here, it's getting to the end of the month, and we're having one of those Januaries. I think maybe I ought to get out here in a couple days before some other people get the idea of getting out. And that will push it down at the end, and then there won't be a rise during the month of January anymore. It'll be flat, could even be going down. So economists got it all figured out. So there will be a January effect a few times until people start to adjust to it, and then it will disappear. Except it doesn't. And here we are again. Who knows? 18 out of 20 years. And I didn't go all in on December 31st. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. I have no idea why I didn't. Maybe I should have. Maybe it's that I just think it's a coincidence. You can flip a coin 20 times and get 20 heads in a row. And then, if it's an honest coin, being sure that you're going to get ahead the next time is kind of dicey. So behavioral economics is about things like this. And the Pension Protection Act of 2006 is about one of these things. And that is the power of the status quo. Now, a lot of research done here by Richard Thaler and colleagues. He's a candidate for a Nobel Prize. He's at Chicago and has done a lot of work on this behavioral economic stuff. People use rules of thumb, make choices based on procedures. My wife and I have a lot of discussions of this stuff, and I explained to her it doesn't matter what accounts we have our money in, you can move it all around. A couple months ago I said, would you pay this insurance bill that I normally pay? She said, why? What's wrong? I said, I'm broke. She looks at me, what? I know what your paycheck is, and I know the only thing you buy is golf balls. A lot of them. But golf balls don't cost that much. What the heck is going on? I said, well, I'm broke. What do you mean you're broke? I said, well, there's no money in my checking account. Oh, that's different than broke. What happened to it? You lose it? Well, no, I moved it over into our brokerage account that served like a savings account. And she said, well, I thought you're the one that told me that it doesn't matter what account it's in. It's all fungible. It can move it back and forth. Oh, yeah, but I moved this out. This is on our savings account. Well, move it back, buddy. And I ended up paying the insurance bill and got a lecture from her about not understanding the stuff that I keep arguing all the time. People do have compartments for money like that. I remember my first wife's older brother and his wife had jars in their kitchen, and they had put money, cash in them, electricity, water, food, and so on. I kept saying, what are you doing? He said, well, this is our accounting system. I said, yeah, I'm going to take this jar and dump it into the next jar. Oh, don't do that. We ruin our lives. You can do that. You can move the money around between them. For heaven's sakes, a glass jar isn't a wall that prevents you from doing that. But people do this mental arithmetic and keep things in different categories. And indeed, in our case, when we move money into this brokerage account, we kind of think you don't take money out of that, even though there's a checkbook in the drawer. And you can write checks on the doggone account, but it's still, you look at the checkbook, I don't think so. Yeah. So number one is that Thaler and his colleagues find that when given choices, do you want to participate in something or not, people in general say not. They don't check the box yes. They just either let it blank or check the box no. Indeed, the thing in particular they were looking at was, do you want to put more money in your 401k or your 403b if you're in a not-for-profit organization? If you look over lots and lots of different firms and institutions, back in the 1990s, you'd find about 30% of people will check the box for, yes, put more in my pension fund. Particularly young people. I ask my kids about this. Do you check that box? Really, Dad? Put more in our pension fund? I'd have to drink lower quality beer if I did that. That's a real answer from, well, there's only one male out of these four, and guess which one was concerned with the quality of the beer, for heaven's sakes. You know, I won't worry about that. Anyway, you guys are going to die and leave it all to us, aren't you? That's why my wife and I have little conversations about should we leave it to the Humane Society or to some, she is an animal rights nut. And when we talk about that, our kids start looking like, whoa. Because that has some credibility to it. If we had picked a charity that was completely unrelated to any of our interests, they'd just blow that off as they're just talking. But this one's serious. So we keep up the chatter about which animal rights group to leave our funds to, hoping to motivate the kids. Credibility, trying to generate some credibility. And we have given a lot of money to these places, and so we're buying credibility that way, and my wife does a lot of work for them, so it does get you some credibility. So, first thing is, particularly with these pension funds, when on the first day of work you're asked, you want to put another 5% in general, before any changes were done, it was about 30% would check yes. Now, second set of literature, Madrian, Lapson, and so on, prior to 2008 find that the private savings rate in the United States is negative. And I keep having discussions with young people and students and so on about what is their plan on how this works out in the really long run. You know, once you borrow enough from China, the Chinese might get the idea that they want to consume at a certain point. And so what's your plan? Give them Hawaii? It wouldn't be selling it to them then. To try to give them Hawaii, they tried to take it in 1941. So, that was the Japanese. Sorry, but give it away or something like this. What is your plan? Now, how you cannot sustain living beyond your means forever. Now, it turns out in 2008, big change. The private savings rate got over 5% in the United States. So we'd like to think that was due to the Pension Protection Act of 2006, but might have been due to what happened in the stock market in late 2008. Pretty surely had more to do with that. And it's going back. It's creeping back. It's still positive, but it's creeping back towards zero again as people get more and more confident and they say, the future will never come. So put these two things together, and economists are very worried about the savings rate. I think this is the last graph, the last slide. And I want to focus your attention on the picture up there, the graph that's up there. What happened was actually Peter Orszag, who became the head of OMB, the first OMB head for Obama, was an economist just working at Brookings, and he did a lot of research on this, and he personally went to congressional representatives one by one and tried to talk them into the change that I'm going to describe to you, that is the Pension Protection Act of 2006. All he did was said, the law says, instead of asking people, instead of having on your form the first day you go to work, if you want to add some more to your pension fund, check here, switch the question. Unless you check here, we're going to add more to your pension fund. Now, you ask the economists, and I told you about 30% said I'll put more in the pension fund. So what would you expect to happen after they switch the question?
30% said no.
30%, let's see, said, no, I don't want you to take the money out. That's what you would expect, right? Economists all say you get the same outcome. It doesn't matter which way you state the question. It doesn't work out that way. Turns out when asked to check a box, 30% of the people check the box in America, and then they look at the question. It doesn't matter what the question is. So when you reversed it, you raised this from 30 to 70%. Now, these people, Madrian et al., have done a lot of experiments with this. This is one firm. It's not named. It's a big company that she got to do this. And what the kind of experiments they did, and here they didn't really have as much of an ethical dilemma. New employees, they had two forms that they gave them in the company. Every other employee got Form A or Form B. Form A said, if you want to put more in your pension plan, check here. Form B said, unless you want to put more in your pension, did I say that right? Unless you, it reversed the question and set it in reverse. And it turns out that they raised the fraction of people that were participating enormously. The 30 and 70 numbers are averages over lots and lots of companies. Here is one company, and the gray line, the bottom line there, it looks like it's around in the 70% level, was the fraction that were adding extra money to their 401k when the question was asked the old way. Look at this, you switch the question and it's a line up near the top. It's actually not at 100%, but it's in the high 90s participate when you flip the question. So Orzog convinced Congress to pass a law that says flip the question. Well, isn't this sort of social engineering or something? A lot of the objections he got were, oh, for heaven's sakes, you're manipulating people. But wait a minute, how did we decide which way to ask the question in the first place? Probably some $12,000 a year clerk was told, put a question on this form, and who knows which way. It was just done arbitrarily to begin with. There's nothing kind of right or wrong about which way you set the question. They're just different. One's one way, one's the other way. Indeed, he got participation, he got agreement when he started asking them, well, if right now we had to ask the question the negative way, would you vote to change it to the positive way? No, I don't want to vote to do anything. Well, that means you'd be in favor of having it the way I want to have it here. Okay. And indeed, this passed with a lot of bipartisan support. There's a book called Nudge, N-U-D-G-E, by Thaler and Cass Sunstein, who had been in the White House. I think he just went back to Chicago, I believe he's at, or Harvard. But the two of them wrote this book called Nudge, and it's about trying to persuade people of things. Indeed, this, I think, is a very free market Republican idea. Don't force them, persuade them. So I got completely perplexed when Fox News goes bonkers when Michelle Obama says, please eat carrots. The way I look at it is the alternative is, there's a law, you must eat carrots, or you'll go to prison. I like please eat carrots a whole lot more, and persuading. And indeed, those of you who might have been in the advertising industry, you were in the persuading business your whole lives. I guess Fox News really wouldn't like you because you're trying to tell people, drink Coke or drink Pepsi or something like that. As long as you're free not to do it, it's a whole lot different than having firm regulations to do it. The book Nudge is all about how we do react to institutions and these little kind of changes that still give us completely the option to do what we were doing in the first place. But we are influenced by by the context. Yeah. So I'm done with that. I can probably do a question or two, but we're out of time.
I had a college professor in Marksville when I was in college, and he said that economists really didn't know why our economy worked like it did.
Well, that's probably true.
And if they ever found out, it would probably fail.
I'm what's called a microeconomist. We worry about incentives, we worry about individuals and firms. There is a lot of agreement among economists about the details in micro. The part that I call magic is the macro part, how it all adds up. And it doesn't just simply add up. There's a lot to do with confidence, with expectations, and now you're getting into the area with individual people where anything goes when you have expectations and different attitudes. And that's the part that right now is in turmoil because we didn't predict that recession very well. A few people did, but not very many. I'm talking about 8 to 9. The recession was over a long time ago. Recession means you're going down. No, we went down, but then we just stayed there. So a lot of people think the staying there is a recession. That's just a matter of the terminology of it. But it's a very deep trough that we're in. And you're right. We find it a mystery, yes. Neurologists find the brain a mystery, too. Okay, I probably should stop. I'll be glad to talk to you afterward, but we're out of time. And I will go on to whatever was next on the outline next time.